There's a really interesting story here. So just in the last couple of days, it's coming out that we are going to allow, at least at some facilities, we are going to allow biological men who identify as trans to go to female prisons. Now, I think you can see why this is probably not the best idea. I will do the disclaimer one more time, although I'm going to really stop doing this because I don't like doing it, and I think it goes without saying at this point. If you as an adult would like to identify any which way, that is completely fine with me. Now, we're talking about criminals here, so let's remove their criminal activity for the moment. But as an adult, if you wish to live as the opposite gender, if that's how you feel deeply and you want to dress that way and live that life and be called that name, I'll treat you completely with respect and the pronouns that you wish, as long as you treat me with respect. Respect is a two-way street, and we are good to go. So this has absolutely nothing to do with being anti-trans. I think what you're going to see is that this story has far more to do with these activists being anti-female. So we've got some numbers here from the Daily Caller. Since January, 261 California prison inmates have requested transfers to prisons aligning with their gender identity. Just to be clear, what that means is 261 biological men want to be in a female prison. Why would that be, Dave? Democratic Governor Gavin Newsom signed SB 132 into law in January, a bill that requires the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation to ask every individual entering the department's custody to specify their pronouns, their gender identity, and whether they identify as transgender, non-binary, or intersex. The vast majority of these requests were from inmates requesting to be transferred to female facilities, and only 6 inmates did not request to be in a women's facility. Do you see how silly and ridiculous this is? The fact that we even talk about these trans issues as much as we do is completely ridiculous. In many ways, it shows you that the woke activists have won, right? They've won because they've set the table of the things that we have to talk about. But a story like this needs to be talked about because it's showing you how deeply corrupt and silly. These are silly people, a guy like to be recalled Gavin Newsom here in California. Imagine you murdered a whole family. You murdered a whole bunch of people. You shot up a whole place. They're bringing you into prison. Oh, hi, everybody. Hi, sir. Are you a male or female? And what pronouns can we call? Oh, sure, you killed all those people, but are you a he or a she or a Decepticon or an Autobot? Please let me know. It's complete nonsense. But even putting that aside, the pronoun part of it, putting the pronoun part of it aside, do you want people who are criminals, potentially violent criminals? I doubt we're talking about a lot of white-collar criminals here. Do you want rapists and murderers and people who are in jail for all sorts of bad things, which is what usually gets people put in jail in the first place? Do you want them being transferred to a women's prison? I watched Orange is the New Black on Netflix about a women's prison. The women are doing some pretty scary stuff, by the way. So there might be some guys that get there and be like, yo, put me back with the men, because these chicks are bananas. So that's possible too. It may not work out that well for these 280 some odd, trans biological men going into the women's facilities. But if any of this is coming as a surprise to you, or if you're one of the good liberals left, one of the 8 good liberals left who voted for Joe Biden because Donald Trump is orange, and you're shocked at how far the administration is going on all of this stuff. Now, I get this is coming from California Governor Newsom, but if you're shocked at how far the Democrats have gone, well, here we're going to show you a clip from before the election when Joe Biden promised to do just this.
Yes, and by the way, in prison, the determination should be that your sexual identity is defined by what you say it is, not what, in fact, the prison says it is. And in that case, you should be entitled also to OGBYN. Anyway, you didn't ask that question, but you're not likely to either, I guess.
Okay, so he had one of his usual mental breakdowns there, but you can see that they were saying this is what we are going to do. It's not going to be the gender that's on your birth certificate or that the prison says that you are, the one that you actually biologically are. It's whatever you tell them that you are, and then accordingly we will put you in that jail. This is not a serious country or a serious rule. These are ridiculous people that we are governed by, absolutely ridiculous people. And I don't even think anyone believes this is right. I believe that there is a tiny sliver of activists that believe this stuff is right. but that's it. And for some reason, you watching this and almost everyone is afraid of saying what the God honest, obvious truth here is, which is that we shouldn't be mixing these things, and we know that there's going to be more violence. And congratulations when a guy who gets put in jail for raping women says, you know what would be pretty great if I was in jail? Wouldn't it be pretty nice to have a cellmate who's a chick and then rapes her while saying that he's a trans woman? And guess what? When that happens, it's on Joe Biden's head. But fortunately for Biden, you don't even know what he's talking about. So I guess he'll be okay with it. All right, let's move on. So the CDC, speaking of non-serious organizations, the Center for Disease Control has now declared racism a serious public health threat. This is a quote from CDC Director Rochelle Walensky. You may remember her from a story we did a couple days ago that we'll get back to in just a moment. The pandemic illuminated inequities that have existed for generations and revealed for all of America a known but often unaddressed epidemic impacting public health: racism. It is not just the discrimination against one group based on the color of their skin or their race or ethnicity, but the structural barriers that impact racial and ethnic groups differently to influence where a person lives, where they work, where their children play, and where they worship and gather in community. And here's a tweet from the CDC. The COVID-19 pandemic has illuminated longstanding racial and ethnic health inequities that have persisted in this country for centuries. Learn more about how CDC is working to understand and measure the health impacts of racism. Okay, now look, there's so much here. What the CDC has now decided to do, the CDC, which is supposed to be in charge of our health and tell us when we can leave our house and who we can see and when we can see them and if we have to wear a mask and a pair of goggles and all of that nonsense. They've decided to go from being a health organization, the Center for Disease Control, which should be worried about diseases and how to control and contain them. They have now flat out said, we are woke, we are political. And in my estimation, that basically means I don't know how I can trust them. They now have decided, Peter Boghossian, my friend who's been on the show many times, who's an assistant professor of philosophy up at Portland State University and one of the great scholars fighting wokeism, he often talks about this. Once an organization allows wokeism in, once you start looking at racial quotas and how many people of this color or gender or whatever we should hire for this or that, you've taken your eye off the ball of the real goal. And what would the real goal of a regular company be? What would the real goal of Burger King be? It would be to sell burgers. They would like to make burgers at a profit so that they can make money and also have happy customers, and that keeps going, and then they can keep growing. Well, what would be the goal of the Center for Disease Control? Would it be to stop racism, which is not something that can actually be stopped unless you want to kill a lot of people, right? I always talk about the Thanos snap, right? It's like they're going to have to kill a lot of people if they want to kill something that is inherent to humanity. You don't want people to be racist. You want to fight the ideas of racism, but of course, it's the wokesters who are importing racism. Who talks about racism endlessly? Who wants racial quotas? Who's stopping Asians from going to Harvard, et cetera, et cetera? It's these very people. But once the Center for Disease Control says, okay, our main mission has now gone from, covering and illuminating and discovering ways to stop diseases to, now we've got to stop racism, an amorphous thing that actually can't be stopped. You're a political organization. Congratulations. And now the irony is, of course, they've been infected by a virus. The CDC has been infected by a mind virus, which is wokeism. And it will most likely destroy the CDC the way it's destroyed most of our liberal institutions. And they seem to have no way of stopping it. They seem to have no inoculation. They seem to have no vaccine. And they'll get what they get.